We're joined by our reporter, Govan Whittles. He's been watching that briefing. Govan, break down the figures as we have them.
Thank you, Tembi. Well, Eskom receiving a 18.74% tariff hike within the 2023-2024 year. That's about just under half of what they had asked for. And Nersa here saying that they've approved these hikes after considering the fact that Eskom is asking for it under tough economic conditions while the country's in load shedding. But also, interestingly, speaking about Eskom's performance as a power utility and specifically its energy availability factor. That means how much energy Eskom is able to produce considering how much capacity it has. Nersa has been critical of Eskom's ability to run the majority of its coal-fired power plants, and a few interesting quotables coming from this briefing. Nersa admitting that it's unfair for consumers to have to pay for Eskom inefficiently running its power plants. Nersa also saying it would then be unfair for it to agree to Eskom's full demands for an increase of a diesel budget while it has not been able to improve the energy availability factor. That's one term that's really permeated throughout this press conference. And let's first get a look at the actual announcement, which puts rands and cents to what Eskom had asked for versus what Nersa has approved here. And the numbers you're about to hear relate to how much revenue Eskom wanted to collect in the next financial period versus how much revenue it will be able to collect considering this 18.74% tariff hike that it's received from Nersa. You'll hear from Nersa's chairperson who made the announcement in a virtual briefing a short while ago.
Eskom's revenue application is for 351 billion rand, which includes the regulatory clearing account balances and the implementation of the court order. Nersa has approved the allowable revenue of 318 billion rand after making various adjustments. For the year 2024-2025, Eskom's revenue application is 381 billion rand, including the RCA and the court order with respect to the government injection. Nersa approved the revenue of 352 billion rand after extracting efficiencies and adjusting where required. Therefore, Nersa has approved a total revenue, allowable revenue of 300 billion rand for the year 2023-2024 financial year, and this translates to 173.80 rand per kilowatt hour, or 173.80 cents per kilowatt hour, and that translates to a percentage increase of 18.65 based on the currently approved Nersa tariff of 146.48 cents per kilowatt hour for the year 22-23.
So, Govan, we're going to pay 18% more for electricity from the 1st of April and then 12% more in the next year. What does that mean then for Eskom as far as its need for diesel, especially in light of the ongoing power cuts currently at stage 6?
Well, it means, first of all, that Eskom will have to keep on burning diesel in its open-cycle gas turbines while it implements this 18.65% increase in the first year, 12.74% in the next year. This is interesting because Nersa finding that Eskom has essentially been using the open-cycle gas turbines to burn diesel and keep the lights on almost every day of its operations. That's according to one of the members of the Electricity Regulation Subcommittee. And this is interesting because Eskom had asked Nersa to allow it to spend 17 billion rand on the procurement of diesel. Nersa has allowed it to spend 8.5 billion rand instead. That's what you call a 6% cap on the OCGTs, a lot of technical terms here. But what's interesting about it is the fact that Nersa says it wants Eskom to raise its energy availability factor almost as high as 72%. That'll be a 15% increase. It's hoping it'll be able to do this within a 3-year period. This is where Eskom's medium-term system adequacy outlook comes into play. Eskom conducted this essential forecast of how it envisions its plants would be able to perform, and put it out in October 2022. And it's forecast that it will be able to raise its energy availability factor from about 58%, where it is now, to about 67% in 2027. That's still below where Nersa wants it to be, and it's still below Nersa's reasoning for giving it a diesel burn budget of essentially 8.4 billion rand. And it looks like Nersa may be expecting much more than Eskom will be able to deliver here. Nersa expecting Eskom to drop its unplanned outages to at least 20% and eventually 18%, and in the next year. Just take into consideration that at least 5 units stripped of Eskom, causing stage 6 load shedding just this weekend. That's raising the unplanned outages of Eskom. Its performance of its plants seem dismal at this point, and in its medium-term system adequacy outlook, Eskom also states that it expects demand to continue being stable, not even drop to being low, while it expects its energy availability factor to rise to high points of above 60% only towards 2027. Nersa importantly stating that even though it's really put a cap on how much money Eskom can spend on diesel at 8.4 billion rand, these are not non-negotiables. The member of the Electricity Regulation Subcommittee stating that they'll enter into negotiations with Eskom about what's achievable in terms of that energy availability factor. And at this point, it should be pointed out that Eskom spent about 14 billion rand on diesel in the last financial year, when it had planned to spend 7 billion rand. So allocating them 8.4 billion rand seems like, again, giving them too little money. And, of course, they expected this to be at around 6 rand per litre for diesel. Eskom will now have to look for cheaper diesel if it wants to meet these targets that have been set by Nersa, and spend the increased tariff of 18.65% according to the regulator.
Govan Whittles, thank you very much for updating us there on the breaking news tonight. If you missed it, you are going to be paying around 18.65% more for electricity from the 1st of April. That announcement made by the country's national energy regulator in the last hour.